Hello everyone, my name is Enrique Cardona and welcome to another review. In this case, we're going to review the newest TV show or the newest streaming show on Disney Plus called Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, I want to go on record to say that one of my favorite superheroes of all time is always going to be Spider-Man, forever and always. And the reason why is because, in many respects, I relate to the character more so than any other character in both Marvel or DC. And that is because he basically has the same problems as we have, whether it's in school, whether it's at universities and college, or at work, or any sort of problems, whether it's relationships, whether it's jobs, family, any sort of problems that he has, he always tries to resolve it, as well as balance his modern life with being a superhero fighting all sorts of crazy villains. Dr. Octopus, the Green Goblin, Venom, Scorpion, Vulture, the Electro, the Sandman, the Lizard, so many countless villains that honestly is probably way bigger than Batman's Rogues Gallery. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just saying that this is the way I think Spider-Man is. He's bigger than any of us think. But regardless of what you think, all I can say is that I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I bought the toys, I saw all the TV shows, all the cartoons, the movies, even the bad ones. Well, except for Man Web and Craven and Morbius, but that's because they barely connect to Spider-Man basically. But yeah, talking about the movies, let's talk about the Homecoming movies because those have something of a relation with this show that we're going to talk about. And that is that most of them, or at the very least, it was supposed to be a prequel for the Tom Holland Spider-Man Homecoming, basically showing us the origin how Spider-Man, the Tom Holland version, came to be. How did he got bit by the radioactive spider? What happened to Uncle Ben? What happened during the 6 months he was being Spider-Man before Tony started recruiting him for the whole Civil War airport scene that we saw in Captain America Civil War. However, along the way, they decided the story was very complicated, and in the end, it was decided to be its own thing, a different type of story with different types of characters and basically a whole new universe is what I'm trying to say. It's basically a different universe with the similarities of the Tom Holland Spider-Man Homecoming stories, but differently. And in this case, we're going to see some changes in the show. One of the things that I should mention is that one of the actors who plays Peter Parker, in this case Hudson Thames, has already played Spider-Man in the What If series, specifically in the first season in episode 5 called Zombies. And I really enjoy his performance as he definitely imitated Tom Holland's Spider-Man very well. So it's only fair that he gets his own TV show, and I'm glad he did. So in any respects, I'm going to take my time with each episode. In each episode that you see me review all the episodes of Spider-Man, I'm going to take my time in order to address some of the things that I notice, the Easter eggs, or the story itself. I don't know if I'm going to get all the stories, but I'm going to try my best to address everything, especially when I'm going to talk about the differences between this show and the Homecoming version of Spider-Man. So I think it's important to say. Now, out of all the cartoons that we see in this show, we're going to see the computer effects being used as a 2D models. Now, this causes issues for a lot of people because it's basically lifeless models trying to be cartoons or trying to be 3D models. But hey, we all trying to do what we can get, and it's basically very inspired into the Spider-Verse movies. So it's important to think about that, especially when we consider that this show is basically into the Spider-Verse, but with the MCU version of Spider-Man. Ish. It's very complicated. But with that being said, let's get started. So let's talk about the first episode. which is called Amazing Fantasy. Now, this episode title is basically inspired by the first appearance of Spider-Man, which was Amazing Fantasy number 15. And appropriately, the first episode shows us that Spider-Man is waking up reading a comic book called Amazing Adult Fantasy number 14, Beware the Giants, which was one of the issues before number 15, so neat detail that they showed there. So basically, it starts with Peter Parker as a normal regular kid, basically living with his aunt, having all sorts of normal issues, not having been bitten by the radioactive spider yet. So that's a neat detail. So another detail that we see is that when Aunt May is taking Peter to the school, we see a little decoration on the car, which is an Iron Man little toy decoration. It's kind of hard to say. They do mention Uncle Ben in this version. In this case, Uncle Ben dies before he ever gets the spider powers. So that's an interesting story. A lot of the stories with Peter Parker involve tragedy, and in this case is the tragedy on Uncle Ben. After all, Uncle Ben was the one who gave Peter Parker advice about everything about life. He was the one who told him with great power comes great responsibility, all sorts of things. But they decide to kill Uncle Ben before that. Now, how did that happen? We don't know, but we are going to find out hopefully in the next episodes. But yeah, basically, Peter Parker is very nice to his Aunt May, who is being played by Kerry Walgreen. So that's a neat detail. And it's basically the same features as the Marissa Tomei and May. So I'm kind of glad that they stuck to that. But yeah, basically, Peter Parker is going to school and basically he's wearing glasses like the original one. He tries to adapt to his surroundings, but before he ever gets to the Midtown school, he actually ends up being in the middle of a fight between a symbiote alien and Doctor Strange. Now, this is the first appearance of the symbiote in this show, and have I done the show, I would have connected it to Peter in and the Homecoming versions. But that's just me. Now, I gotta say, the man who voices Doctor Strange, which is voiced by none other than Robin Atkin Downs, does a pretty kick-ass job as Doctor Strange, or at the very least, he does a great imitation of Benedict Cumberbatch Doctor Strange, which is not a small feat considering that Benedict is trying to do an American accent. But yeah, basically, he's fighting this symbiote alien who looks like a scarab, but kind of with a fashion sense. They do all sorts of things. They do a reference with Ned Leeds and the cape, all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, in the end, we see that in one of the portals, a spider comes out, and when Doctor Strange takes the symbiote out of the way, the spider falls down into Peter. Now, Peter, before he gets bitten by the radioactive spider, he meets Nico Minoru, who in this case, Nico is being played by Grace Song. Now, this character, for those who don't know, this character appeared first in the TV show The Runaways, which was streaming on Hulu. But in this case, now we're going to have Nicole in this show. And in kind of a Michelle prototype, basically the awkward, or at the very least, very quiet, very gothic, very, I don't know, basically the unattractive young girl who's friends with Peter. Although, no, that is not fair because Nico is not unattractive. It's just that it's very different from the Michelle that we saw in the movies. Now, one fun fact: originally they wanted Jessica Jones to be in the place of Nico, but at the last minute they decided to change it. I don't know why. Maybe because in the shows that we saw of Jessica Jones, she was already an adult, and Peter is still basically, well, a kid in his 15s, basically in his 15s. But yeah, basically Peter gets bitten by a radioactive spider, and we go to the theme song. Now, I don't know this band, the Math Club, but they basically do the theme song complete with a whole remix of the Spider-Man 60s TV show cartoon, which was hilarious, doing an edition called Never Like Me, and it's basically a similar style to the Into the Spider-Verse credit scenes, which was I deeply appreciated. And I like that they put all the covers and all the additions of comic book Easter eggs into that intro. So I appreciate that. So as a whole, not a bad start. So now let's get to the episode itself. Now, after Peter gets bitten by the radioactive spider, it's basically the same life, only with spider powers. He basically is trying to do all the routines, but with the spider powers, he misses the train again, but he also uses his webs and his Spider-Man alternative disguise in order to go to school, only to get spotted by one of the school members chasing out Harry Osborn. Now, Harry is played by Zeno Robinson. And in this case, this is the first time that Peter or Spider-Man meets Harry Osborn. Now, the kids that I see bullying Harry are basically kind of like a prototype of the Enforcers, which, if you don't know, the Enforcers are the first villains that Spider-Man deals with after he became a superhero. Now, they don't mention them as Enforcers by name. Basically, they are like an analog, unless I missed something. But yeah, basically, they're the first guys that we see this Peter taking down and saving Harry. And in this case, we see that he and Harry are forming a friendship, so but they don't know each other's secret identities. So basically, Harry thanks Spider-Man for the help, and Peter goes to class. And he goes late, and we see the passage of time. We see that Nico and Peter are now friends, and now we see that Peter is longing for another girl. Now, in this case, in the homecoming version, we saw that Peter was crushing on Liz Allen. But in this case, we see Peter crushing on Pearl Pangan, played by Kathy Ang. Now, Pearl in this case is one of the characters from the comic books. And in fact, she plays a superhero called Wave. Now, I don't know if they're gonna make her into, if they're going to make her into a superhero during the show or during the other seasons they announce that they're going to be. But honestly, it's good to see a different type of class. But yeah, basically, Peter wants to ask Pearl for a dinner, or basically be his girlfriend. So in the originally, I thought it was a replay from the Homecoming version, but hey, at the very least, we don't see that she is the daughter of a bad guy, so that's a good thing, right? We see that Peter is doing sketches for his original Spider-Man suit that we see in the comics, but we see that he spots trouble and he goes into action. So basically, we see Peter going out of the class and trying to stop this van full of criminals. They do recreate the original scene from Civil War. If you don't remember it, is that when Tony Stark is showing Peter the footage of him stopping a van with a bus with all his strength, they basically recreate that in this episode. Basically, Spider-Man stops the villains or stops the bad guys from getting away. And that's a needy detail. Honestly, this show is showing its attention of detail. So yeah, in the end, Peter doesn't get the girl because Pearl, as it turns out, has a boyfriend called Lonnie Lincoln. Yes, that Lonnie Lincoln. Lonnie Lincoln, for those who don't know, is one of the Spider-Man's biggest antagonists. In fact, he actually plays Tombstone, and he is one of Spider-Man's most formidable adversaries. And this is a guy you don't want to mess around with. And he's basically now a high school quarterback who has the girl and everything, and now Peter notices it. Now, Lonnie Lincoln is being played by Eugene Bird, who you probably know him for being one of the scientists in Bones, but also if you saw the CW Arrowverse, you remember him as being John Diggle's brother, the one who became a villain after that. But yeah, basically he plays Lonnie Lincoln in this show. So it's going to be interesting how they're going to transition him from a good guy to a bad guy. But basically, Peter and Lonnie Lincoln are paired together as science bros. Now, in this show, they show him that Lonnie is not exactly just a young quarterback who doesn't know what science is. He is actually a pretty smart kid and actually very friendly to Peter. He actually decides not to bully Peter and act like a friend, like an actual human being that shows that he's willing to be part of the project. After all, that's part of the good nature of Lonnie Lincoln in this show. He wants to do good despite all the problems. And he has a lot of problems because as we see in the episode, he goes home, which is located in Harlem, and it's being shown that he's not having a lot of luck, whether he's by race or whether it's by living poorly. He's like a popular kid, but he's still living a rough life. I should mention that Lonnie's father is played by Phil Lamar, another DC alumni who actually lends his voice to be in this show, which is amazing. I really like Phil Lamar. It's the second time that I see him in another Spider property. This is a big thing. If you don't know, Phil Lamar appeared in Spider-Man 2 during the train scene, and we see him up front. If you haven't seen it, check it out. You won't miss it. Another thing that I actually like about this first episode is that fact that Spider-Man stops a criminal from robbing a pizza delivery guy. But in an actual very heartfelt moment, we see that Spidey wants to the woman who is basically the thief to be nice and actually lets her go because she was crying, breaking down to tears, and most basically just feeling remorseful and regretful about stealing property that she didn't have all to feed herself in a moment of weakness. And Spider-Man, instead of putting her into the police, she tells the guy, the pizza delivery owner, that they just should let her go. And honestly, it's a very humane moment. I really enjoy it because it shows the true kind nature of Spider-Man, of Peter Parker. Yes, this is a guy who beats the bad guys and stops criminals. But he also sees the humanity, the compassion, the problems they go through. I mean, this woman was just trying to steal because she didn't know what to do. She's having a rough time. And in the end, Spidey lets her go, and the woman is showing gratefulness, and she's grateful. And I deeply appreciate that. And I think the pizza delivery guy also appreciated that as well because it's just showing the humanity and compassion that, let's face it, we need to have from other people. We live in a society that doesn't trust anybody, and honestly, moments like that we see in this show fill my heart. In all honesty, I really, really enjoy that moment. It stands out for me. It's one of my favorite moments. But yeah, let's move on. Basically, Spider-Man is being thanked by the pizza owner by having a pizza, and Spidey recovers a DVD player, I think. And if you don't know what this means, is basically they are recreating the first scenes in which we see Tom Holland's Spider-Man appearing into the big screen. But there are a few changes. For example, the car that stops is a Ferrari or something. And when Peter goes into the apartment, we see not Tony Stark, but we see Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn is now Peter's mentor. And he's being played by Coleman Domingo, which definitely puts into perspective the differences between the MCU version and this version. And that's where the episode ends. So, as far as first episodes go, it's pretty basic, to the point. Basically, we see how Spider-Man is. I should also mention, in the intro of the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, we see a version of Crusher Hogan in the intro. And basically, probably one of the first stages of Peter when he became Spider-Man. And instead of being a wrestler, Peter just stops a bad guy. So Crusher Hogan is basically a villain. So yeah, I appreciate that detail. But yeah, I don't know what the future holds for this episode or the entire show. Like I said before, this is a different show than the ones that we see before. And a lot of people are still up in hands or basically not exactly showing their support to this show because basically we had a lot of TV shows. The 1994 Spider-Man, which is my first and my favorite, and the Spectacular Spider-Man, which is considered by many the best, but felt that they canceled it unfairly. And I agree. Spectacular Spider-Man should get another run just like X-Men 97. And honestly, I don't know if we are going to see that in the future. I hope we do. But yeah, basically, this is a new beginning of Spider-Man. Now, as far as other shows that I've seen from Ultimate Spider-Man and DC DX Spider-Man or Marvel Spider-Man, basically, while those shows are kind of good, they're kind of forgettable. Hopefully, this one is different enough, but also stands out from the rest. And he's doing that. He's showing a different type of story of Peter Parker, showing us. Well, okay, so one thing that I should mention though, a lot of people are sick and tired of Spider-Man being in high school, and I understand that. People want to see Spider-Man, a man who goes through the daily life problems, the jobs, the relationships, the other issues of adulthood. Now, I agree with those. I mean, I want to see Spider-Man deal with real adult life problems. But honestly, I always prefer Spider-Man in high school because that's where the whole origin is. And hey, this is a new version. This is not the MCU version, technically. It's doing a lot of things that are similar, but it's definitely a different story. Kind of like What If. It's showing us a different perspective from a different universe. Basically, imagine what to say instead of Tony Stark being the one who represents Spider-Man, it's actually Norman Osborn. So it's a different change and hopefully something for the best. Now, a lot of people were also up in hands to think that this show was going to be very woke, very political, or very, that's going to show not Spider-Man, but also showing us a lot of things that we don't want to see in woke media. Hopefully, in this episode, we don't see that. It's basically focused on Peter Parker and a little bit on Lonnie Lincoln, which is important to mention. So I don't know what the future is for this franchise, so hopefully it's for the best. And honestly, I miss seeing Spider-Man on something. So hopefully this goes well, and hopefully I get to talk to you about episode 2 and what happens, okay? So that was my review. I think it's good, not a bad start. Hopefully we see amazing things from this season. So next time I'm going to talk about Creature Commandos. But until then, I'm in Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Take care, true believers.